Doing a lot of firsts lately. My first soundtrack reviews, and now my first instrumental album review. Let's get into it. Welcome to A Ronan Does Music, where today we're checking out the 6th studio album from horror-influenced duo Dance with the Dead called Driven to Madness. This is my first time hearing these guys was with this album, and it's pretty interesting considering that lately I've been trying to get a little more electronic music into my listening routines, so finding this kind of thing was like, hell yeah, let's go. Already listened to artists like Sudden Death, Danger a little bit, but nothing quite really expansive beyond that. So finding somebody that sounded individual from those two artists I was already listening to was a welcome addition again to my catalog. Like I said, my first impression of this band came with this album, and I actually found this album randomly while looking at my Facebook feed trying to find new albums that were coming out for a week, and people in this group that I was in were like, hey, this is coming out this week, go check it out. And I was like, oh fuck, I need something to do, here we go. Well, I usually don't drift to fully instrumental projects. I found a lot to unpack and enjoy here in this album, so let's talk more about it. One of the things that's really enticing to me is the duo of Justin and Tony choosing to throw together synth-heavy electronic and straight-up metal guitar riffs, other influences here and there in between the different tracks on this album. It was hard finding a lot of info on this project, so I'm assuming it's both of them or maybe one member putting together individual elements. Maybe it's one member doing the synth side and the other guy is doing the metal stuff. Maybe they switch roles. I'm not quite sure, but I'm just going to assume that both have equal hands within the take of music here. Origins aside, I think the song Sludge is as good a place as any to start if you're a new fan or want to get a good idea of what there is to hear on this album. With the chorus and bridges featuring mainly metal music influence, with a solo even finding its way into things, but still having enough of that electronic side of the band within this track to kind of give you both the ideas in both spectrums of the sides of the music spectrum, happening on this album overall. Speaking on the synth as well, it's very almost 80s influence. Feels like something that could find its way easily into something like Stranger Things, or maybe perhaps a popular 80s aspect. You could put this song, the synth side of it, into an older film like Back to the Future, and I feel like it would fit the vibe and it would fit things just as well depending on the scene that you inserted it into. While the song focuses on more of a heavy aura as opposed to some of the other tracks, it doesn't matter which side of the coin these two decide to focus on for a song, it comes off as clean as neon lights in the background of a big-ass city. This project is actually influenced by artists like Metallica and Misfits, but also has a lot to thank the genre of horror for in terms of things to learn from and things like inspiration. You could arguably pick a couple of tracks present here, and they feel like they could fit into any classic horror tale like Friday the 13th, or Halloween, or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but there is some collaborative work found from a very interesting source. That being a collaborative effort featuring John Carpenter and his son Cody on the song March of the Dead. Whether the intention was to create something that Michael Myers himself would kill to or not, considering that John Carpenter is one of the many faces behind the Halloween music, this song features a very slash-happy progression that feels like just the kind of thing to match Murder 2. I especially love the very suspenseful, very horror-esque and horror-centric synth that comes in halfway through. I'm using the term just synth because I'm not entirely sure what to call different kinds of that, different versions of that. So I'm just kind of going for a blanket term here, so excuse me on that. The overall grand atmosphere the song gives off as well is just phenomenal. The end of the song has an inserted spoken word piece, and one that gives you this feeling of anticipation that is immediately met and followed through with on the next track. One of my personal favorites, Firebird. Firebird is probably the best middle ground song on Driven to Madness, featuring an equal measure of typical metal instruments, matched against the computer manufactured but still just as skillful keyboard elements, synthesizer elements, and everything coming together to create a real nice melting pot of the two very different genres. If you look for something to complement recent games that are just as equally bright, like the 80s influenced Security Breach, or maybe something a little far off but still within the same reach like Halo Infinite, this is a nice companion song. This is a song you can really go to. You kind of get similar vibes, similar feelings, both visually with like the album cover obviously, and of course this is what we're focusing on here, in the audio elements. It feels like it could really drive your gaming session either way. Songs like Firebird have you covered with constant energy that builds up to a consistent end, and one that employs the same riff that even opened things up, showing some real consistency on display from the duo. With the lack of lyrics, you'd be justified in thinking and fearing that parts of this album kind of drag when they have to rely on purely instrumental takes, and without any real vocal story being told outside of like very quick moments in the first half of the album. But very rarely did I feel like time was wasted or something was repeated or even sounding too close to something that was already explored here on the album. It has a very great sense of self-identity, and one that doesn't let itself kind of drag down. You can really follow the path along. You can put the music on shuffle, and any listen of the album will show that this is a solid album that can stand pretty strongly for being an instrumental piece. And the only time I had any semblance to thinking I've heard something before was on the late track Worm of Doom, having a lot of structural similarity to the previously discussed Firebird, but also enough extra elements to really just dash my fears and put them to the side. But I still think it's worth bringing up just for the sake of conversation, sake of the review here. It was kind of a shorter review, and I apologize for that. There's not a lot to say beyond what I already have, with this being a project that accomplishes its job very well, but it also does it only has so many things to say, note of, coming from me. I'm not very well versed in looking at instrumental music. I can appreciate it, I can enjoy it, I can listen to it, I can do a in my opinion, semi-decent review and sort of synopsis here, but I can't really produce as much, or as many talking points here, I suppose. But I do have a couple things to say to wrap up. Every song on the album fits a different level of mood, from metal, electronic, or again, a fusion of the two, whether it be sitting in the middle or majorly relying on one side as opposed to the other for how they want to determine the mood of each individual song. And it's not an easy thing to do, whether it's a mainstream act on the levels of a band like Ghost or a more less known band from a Warped Tour level of the scene like Attack Attack. It's not easy to make this kind of fusion of very different elements come together and sound as good as they do. And these guys have done that. Dance with the Dead does the job with no signs of struggle or inconsistency. And I gotta say, this isn't an album that's gonna make me think like, oh yeah, instrumental music is my new favorite thing. But I will say that this makes me not only want to dive into their music a little more, but it's also making me want to check out some more instrumental stuff, kind of put it against this, some more stuff that falls in the same genres, as well as just kind of like branch out and try and find just more individual things. This is a really interesting album. It kept my attention, it stayed steady, and it managed to sort of tell its own story without the help of lyrics or singing. For those reasons, and the reasons I've discussed before, Driven to Madness by Dance with the Dead gets a 7.5 out of 10. And that's the review. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Let's not talk about the fact that my hand is so purple from dyeing my hair. And I hope you're having a good day. Stay hydrated. I'll see you next time.